The thermocline hit me like an invisible wall at 40 feet. One moment I was gliding through bathwater warm Caribbean blue. The next I'd punched through into something that felt like liquid ice. My body tensed involuntarily as the temperature dropped 15 degrees in the space of a single fin kick. But it wasn't the cold that made me stop dead in the water. Below the thermocline, the visibility exploded from good to extraordinary. It was like someone had switched from standard definition to 4K Ultra HD. I could see the sandy bottom 80 feet below as clearly as if I were looking through air. And there, right at the edge where the reef wall dropped into the abyss, something massive was moving. I'd been diving this site off the coast of Cozumel for 3 days straight, part of my advanced open water certification. Palancar Reef was famous for its drift dives, where the current carried you along like an underwater conveyor belt past towering coral formations. My instructor, Miguel, had promised that by the end of the week, I'd be comfortable with deep dives, navigation, and drift diving. What he hadn't mentioned was that I'd witnessed something that would fundamentally change how I saw the ocean. The shape moved again, and my heart rate spiked. Even from 60 feet away, I could tell it was enormous. My dive computer showed 55 feet of depth, well within my newly certified limits. But this felt different. This felt like stepping into someone else's living room uninvited. Miguel must have sensed my hesitation. He appeared beside me, his eyes questioning behind his mask. I pointed toward the wall. He followed my gesture, then his whole body went rigid. That's when I knew I wasn't imagining things. In 10 years of guiding dives in Cozumel, Miguel later told me, he'd seen this maybe 3 times. We were looking at a great hammerhead shark, easily 14 feet long, patrolling the reef wall like a prehistoric security guard. Not the smaller bonnet heads that occasionally cruise by. Not even the more common scalloped hammerheads that divers sometimes spot in deeper water. This was the apex predator of the hammerhead family, and it was magnificent. My breathing quickened, and I forced myself to slow down. In through the regulator, out through the regulator. Count to 4 on the inhale, count to 6 on the exhale. Just like they taught us in the rescue diver scenario. Panic is the enemy underwater, but fascination can be just as dangerous if it makes you forget your training. The hammerhead turned, and for a moment, I could see its bizarre head shape in profile. That impossibly wide, flattened head with an eye on each end, sweeping back and forth like a metal detector. Scientists call it the cephalofoil, and it's packed with special sensors that can detect the electrical fields generated by living creatures. Right now, it was detecting us. Miguel tapped his pressure gauge and showed me his fingers. I checked mine and signaled back. We both had plenty of air, but at this depth, we were consuming it faster than at shallower levels. The rule of thirds applied here. 1/3 of your air for the outward journey, 1/3 to return, and 1/3 in reserve for emergencies. We could stay, but not for long. The current was gentle but insistent, trying to pull us along the wall. Miguel grabbed a dead piece of coral, never touched living coral, and held us in place. I did the same, finding a rocky outcrop to steady myself. The hammerhead continued its patrol, seemingly unbothered by our presence. Or maybe it was very bothered and was simply deciding what to do about these strange, bubble-blowing intruders. That's when I noticed we weren't alone in our fascination. A school of horse-eye jacks, hundreds of them, had formed a shimmering silver curtain between us and the shark. They moved as one organism, their sides flashing like mirrors as they turned in perfect synchronization. The hammerhead approached the school, and they parted like a metallic curtain, reforming seamlessly behind the predator. My camera was clipped to my BCD and my fingers fumbled for it. This was a moment that demanded documentation, but I was torn. Experience it or capture it? Live it or share it? In the end, the choice was made for me. By the time I had the camera ready and the settings adjusted for the deeper, darker water, the hammerhead had turned away from the wall and begun swimming into the blue. I raised the camera and fired off 3 shots, knowing even as I pressed the shutter that they would never capture what I was really seeing. How do you photograph presence? How do you capture the way the water itself seemed to part respectfully for this creature? The photos would show a dark silhouette against blue water, maybe a hint of that distinctive head shape. They wouldn't show how small and insignificant I felt, how privileged and terrified and amazed all at once. The current was picking up. Miguel tapped my shoulder and pointed to his dive computer, then held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes at this depth before we needed to start ascending. I nodded and took one last long look at the Hammerhead, now just a shadow disappearing into the cobalt void where the continental shelf dropped away to thousands of feet of darkness. We began our ascent, riding the current now, letting it carry us along the wall. At 40 feet, we passed back through the thermocline, and the water warmed around me like a blanket. The visibility decreased, but somehow that made it feel safer, more contained. A spotted eagle ray glided beneath us, its wings rippling like silk in the current. Normally, that would have been the highlight of any dive. Today, it was a footnote. At our safety stop, hovering at 15 feet for 3 minutes to off-gas the nitrogen that had built up in our blood, I watched the surface ripple above like molten silver. Miguel held up his hand in the OK sign, and I returned it, but we both knew that OK didn't begin to cover what we just experienced. Back on the boat, the other divers were chattering about the eagle ray, a moray eel, a school of barracuda. Normal Cozumel sights. Wonderful sights. Miguel and I said nothing at first, just exchanged a look that said more than words could. Then as I was peeling off my wetsuit, another diver asked what we'd seen. Hammerhead, Miguel said simply. Grande. The boat erupted. Everyone talking at once, asking for details, demanding to know exactly where, exactly when, could we go back to the same spot tomorrow? I understood their excitement, but I also understood something else now. The ocean doesn't perform on command. It shares its secrets when it chooses, to whom it chooses. Over the years since that dive, I've logged hundreds more. I've dived with whale sharks in the Philippines, explored World War II wrecks in Truk Lagoon, descended into cenotes in the Yucatan. Each dive has been a gift, each experience unique, but I've never seen another great hammerhead. Sometimes, usually when I'm teaching new divers now myself, they ask what my most memorable dive was. I tell them about that day in Cozumel, about the thermocline and the visibility and the shark that changed everything. They always ask the same question. Will I see something like that? Maybe, I tell them. Maybe not. But here's what I learned that day. The ocean doesn't owe us anything. Not sightings, not experiences, not perfect conditions. We're visitors in a world that existed for millions of years before us and will exist for millions of years after. Every dive is a privilege, whether you see a hammerhead or just a hermit crab. The magic isn't in what you see, it's in being there, 60 feet underwater, breathing compressed air, existing for a brief moment in a place humans were never meant to be. They usually nod, but I can see they don't quite get it yet. They will, though. Eventually, every diver has their hammerhead moment, the dive that shifts something fundamental inside them. The moment when you realize you're not just learning to dive, you're learning to see. And once you truly see the ocean, you can never unsee it. You carry it with you, even on dry land, especially on dry land. A part of you remains forever at depth, suspended in blue silence, waiting for the next shadow to emerge from the deep. That hammerhead taught me patience. It taught me humility. It taught me that the best moments in diving, like the best moments in life, can't be planned or purchased or guaranteed. They simply happen, often when you least expect them, always when you most need them. All you can do is be ready. Check your air, watch your depth, trust your buddy, and keep your eyes open. The ocean will do the rest.